Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights session. Today, I'm really pleased once again to be talking with a couple of excellent guests on a really interesting topic. This time, Unified Process Notation, or UPN. And I've got a couple of experts to talk about that subject with us today. Before we do talk about the subject, however, let's do a regular introductions. Chris, if I could start with you to introduce yourself, please.
Perfect. Yes, thanks, John. My name's Chris Green. I'll probably start at the beginning. I spent most of my career as a process consultant, in various guises, working for various different companies, and that's where I've learned about UPN. Basically, I've been probably one of the few BAs that I've spoken to that is predominantly 95+% using UPN. So yeah, cut my teeth at a company called Nimbus Partners back in the early 2000s. Had the pleasure of working for companies like Nestle, Sony, BAE, all these sort of big names, as well as some smaller ones. And they got bought out by TIBCO, and a big US company. And a few years there, and then went off to work at a low-code vendor. Yeah, back when low-code automation tool sets was not a thing, so that was quite a good, interesting challenge. And after a few years, left there to start up a business of our own with a couple of ex-colleagues from Nimbus. Again, creating another tool, from scratch around UPN, which we had a good roller coaster fun ride, building that up to a point where we beginning of about 11 months ago, beginning of January last year, got acquired by a company called Netcall. So where they do a load of they've got a whole platform of tools, and the tool that we'd created was a perfect fit, which I'm sure we'll start to talk about in this session about actually how do you understand, how do you document your processes. So interesting role there, basically doing what we're doing for SCORE, but part of a wider company, working with companies. How do we get process improvement, process opportunities, ultimately through to automation in some cases, but how do we get that working with all sorts of organizations?
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris. And Vipul, over to you, please, for a similar introduction.
Sure, indeed. So it's Vipul Ranpara. So currently working in Capco as a consultant. So my predominantly the background is in pension insurance, and then obviously started working more towards the BA sides of it, business analysis sides of it, towards and the more of the consultancy. Been Capco for almost like nearly 3 years now. Varied projects I've done with different clients, global clients, and like HSBC, Royal London, Aviva, several sort of regulatory projects, global projects where I managed to do a good sort of, the business analysis activities over a period, done quite a bit, very good process charts, flows, over a period. So understand what's the requirements within the global organizations and how the structures works basically. And so I'm here today to talk about the UPN processes, which I've used, but not as extensively as probably the Chris or the John. But so I'll try to share my experiences today. But I've closely look at it because when I've briefly worked with the American Express in between as well, so they have used a Salesforce and they've used UPN processes as well. So happy to talk about it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. And I mean, there's no barrier here to entry in terms of levels of experience. Just having an opinion on UPN is good enough. And I'm sure through the conversation anyway, we'll get to maybe share a little bit of insight for those watching that weren't necessarily aware of UPN prior to this conversation. Well, I should say to those people as well, if they like the video, please like the video, subscribe. And of course, if you've got any comments, whether it's to add anything to what we've been saying today or any suggestions more widely, always happy to hear them. All right, but so brilliant. So thank you, gents, for your introductions. Let's start then with a very fundamental question. And so what is Unified Process Notation, UPN? And Chris, I'll start with you on that one, please.
Yeah, I'm going to have to correct you there. It's Universal Process Notation, but everyone just calls it UPN, so I'm not surprised.
That's it.
But it's a mapping standard, and it's one that's designed to be powerfully simple and accessible for a wide audience of people in an organization. So it's you can trace it back right down to IDEF 0. So if you've heard of IDEF 0, standard that was defined early 70s, and it was picked up by the US Air Force as a way, or a standardized way of understanding complex systems. Yeah, so you can sort of trace it back to that, and then UPN was created early 2000s at Nimbus Partners, the company that Shai worked with. One of my co-founders at SCORE was one of part of the board, not the board, the group of people that actually define the standard. It'd been used for years previously, but because we kept coming up against standards, big organizations saying we have a standard, we need to use a standard. That's when it was coined. So it was put down pen to paper, developed there. But it's a very, as I said, powerfully simple way. So where something like BPMN and other modeling languages have dozens, hundreds of shapes, and different connectors and the like, UPN is very much centered around inputs and outputs, verb and noun activity, and who's doing it or what system's doing it underneath. And there are some differences and complexities you can add to that. The other, apart from the simplicity, the other kind of really powerful thing about it is it's hierarchical. So you can create end-to-end, high-level end-to-end flows, and then drill down into more detail. And that's kind of a key component of it. So it's a standard. Yeah, it's a way of engaging people throughout the organisation, cross-functionally or otherwise.
Thank you, Chris. And I know from my own sort of research prior to this, I thought, where did it come from? And from what I gather, in the 1990s, I think there was a chap in Holland called Kees van Hee. I've written his name down, who was supposedly the original creator of UPN as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things which bubbled away, and it kind of got picked up, and then it got defined, and people use it. It's owned by a few people probably in terms of its origins.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for the introduction. Vipul, have you got anything to add in terms of what is UPN?
Yeah, sure. So from my point of view, UPN is simple, engaging, diagrammatically, obviously notations that's applicable across the industries and at companies of all different sizes, and for processes at every level of the complexities that it can, taken care of. If you are used to drawing the flow charts, and it might seem pointless to learn the new notations, being honest, but I think so UPN's got a plenty of benefits to offer, and which is encapsulates every level of process from top level overview down to the detailed actionable diagrams. And one of the benefits of that can be viewed online and embedded within the apps, can be created collaboratively, and it can have a broad and then the narrow scope as well. And it can provide the context for the metrics and management decisions as well. And yes, I mean, what Chris mentioned as well, that inputs and outputs, and it's basically, it's not, we don't see the big swim lanes, the big diagrams, boxes. It's restrict itself to 8 to 10 sort of a boxes, and you try to obviously condense those details within those 8 to 10 boxes, and basically detailed roam about who, when, why, and how, basically. So those details will be included within the the UPN process.
Brilliant, thanks, Will. So, I mean, it's definitely from what you both said. I mean, it definitely comes across that it's at heart of it a simpler way of defining process, but still with some of that structure that we need to define the flow and the activity. Feels like actually quite, and I know, Vipul, you mentioned some benefits there. We'll definitely cover in a bit more detail some of those benefits shortly. I wonder, just before that, though, I mean, for those people that might be used to using BPM or some other models, I wonder, Vipul, why would someone use UPN as opposed to BPMN or some of those other process models, do you think?
I mean, really, from it doesn't include some more of the complexity levels. It's a debatable, but because from my point of view, because when we look at the flow charts, it's with the different swim lanes and everything, it's get sometimes too complicated for on a simple manners to understand. And when I say it's basically it restricts itself to 8 to 10 boxes, then obviously it makes the life very easier for somebody to just understand the process. So there is advantages definitely in terms of the benefits to use UPN and and current culture and within the industries, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. I guess with a smaller palette, if you like, of models and objects that you can use, probably forces the individual to think more simplistically without getting bogged down in perhaps some of the detail that the uninitiated could perhaps get bogged down in BPM.
Yeah, I've picked up, one of the processes that I can, happy to show as well, that how it looks, and obviously I can share, definitely. Yeah.
Brilliant. May take you up on that. I know Chris is going to share his screen
Yeah,
in a while as well. We'll see.
that's
I'm
fine.
going to take you on that offer. Think Vipul. All right. And Vipul, I know you started to mention as well, as we were talking some of the benefits. We'll come on to that shortly. But I wonder, Chris, I guess anything else you might add in terms of why someone would use UPN as opposed to BPMN?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to the audience. Who are you wanting to engage? And it's not about the lowest common denominator. It's not a race to the bottom. It's about, yeah, we're lucky people, aren't we? We could look at a complex process and probably given enough time or step back, we can make some sense of it. But that's a skill. That's what we've honed over the many, many years and different projects and experience that
Yeah.
we've gained. But those stakeholders that you want to go and engage with, those stakeholders you want to go and talk with, they're not stupid. They're very, very clever people in their own area of expertise, but they're not going to know what BPM and shapes are doing and what this little path means. And so it's about having a really simple way of engaging with those people. So if you're trying to engage with end users, with stakeholders, across department heads and whoever it is, those multiple audiences, then choose a language which is going to help them. Yeah. And then even if you then translate it into something more complex or distill it down into something more complex later for a different audience, fine. But always choose the right language, whatever it is, right methodology for the people that you want to engage with is my
Yeah, that makes
view.
sense. And I think perhaps
So
then using UPN is a good way to encourage those individuals to keep it simple, keep it lightweight, so that
Yeah, yeah.
actually it's something that can initially at least resonate with the business that they're speaking to. I know Chris, you mentioned earlier on about it being like hierarchical as well in structure.
Yeah.
So it can mean that without adding all of the notation we might ultimately need to add, you can at least start to think about in a simplistic way what are the main activities and the process and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
flow of
exactly.
those
Yeah,
individuals.
yeah. It frames a lot of the details discussions, which is pretty powerful. So if you've got like people introduced, ideally, you've got 6, 7, 8 boxes on a process. That in itself can be quite a good
Yeah,
challenge. It really gets you to think about what are the buckets, how do we slice it up, and then as you get to more detail, you're having a really focused discussion and you're not jumping all around the place. Yeah. And that helps not just the BA, the facilitator, it helps people. Yeah. It helps them understand and have a really good conversation focused around an area or scope. And that's why I love it. That's why I love the hierarchy as well. It gets you to have that focused discussion, not jump around, which people get confused with. I get confused with. Whereas if you can lay it out, then break it down, that's how the mind works. It's how you digest things.
yeah, it makes sense. It seems like it's make it an accessible approach or tool,
Mm.
way of doing things that you don't necessarily need to rely on years and years with the process expertise to pick up from what I'm getting.
Exactly. No, exactly. No, definitely.
And I mean, I know football nicely introduced some benefits a while ago, so we'll come to it. I think probably now is a good point to do that. I know, some of the items that were mentioned, not just by Vibble, but around that ability to work a bit more collaboratively and think about the flow, the simplicity of the 8 to 10 objects as well. But I wonder, I mean, Vibble, are there any other benefits of using VPMN as part of business process that you think are worth calling out?
for the BPN, um,
UPN, sorry,
UPN,
UPN. Get my
yeah.
acronyms right.
I mean, it is a simple one, and as obviously Chris has mentioned as well that, and the good thing is about that it encapsulates the every level of the process from top level view down to the detail actionable diagrams. And obviously it looks like just 8 to 10 boxes, as Chris mentioned, but it's a lot of brainstorming is goes inside. And obviously, as you know, the stakeholders aims to put 100%. And because when we look at it for within the simple, for example, the simple sort of, the case where we say if the customer is having the issues, one of the issues, they can go to the webs and then, submit that issue, that how that issues can be resolved. That's input to output. So depending within that issues that, how that's, can be actionable by using the EPN, UPN processes. So, I mean, that it's get very simple, but it includes quite detailed informations as well. If it includes quite obviously, if it's got a broad scope insight, then definitely it includes within that. There is a benefits of using the UPN, and as I mentioned earlier as well, that includes and it doesn't mean that it just use it for a simple simple sort of the query or the use cases or simple processes. It can be used and supports the regulatory and compliance basis as well. So it's get detailed. If you want to go into the deep of it and provide more detailed informations by UPN, then certainly there is a possibility of using it.
And I think that point you made there, Vipul, is really, really important in terms of it might be a simple approach to defining process, but it doesn't mean that you're precluded from defining complex processes themselves in a simple way.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I'd say to a lot of people is it's not about simplifying complex processes. It's about simplifying the understanding of complex processes, and I quite like that sort of saying. If you can help people understand what is going on, complex or otherwise, that's where you get the magic.
There is the only things I add is here as well that when we use UPN, yes, there is it won't show the nature of the complexities as you can show within the process flows. It does. There is the informations, there is attachment that you can do, which provide the details of within the specific the activity boxes. And so the specifically the stakeholders or home servers, that task is they can go inside and look more detailed information as well. So rather than obviously probably you tangle more yourself within those, the extra 10 boxes, you can just simply open that, activity box, resources, and then find what exactly the details of that as well. So yeah, there's a benefits.
Chris, any further benefits you would like to highlight?
Yeah, it's interesting if you think about what is a BA, what's their role, and I know we can jump in. It's about capturing requirements or defining a specification or looking at an organizational structure. But in my simplistic mind, because I quite like to break things down, that it's all about just trying to get that as best understanding of the organization as possible. Or often it's described as you're the translator, because you're trying to talk to one audience and talk to another. So I do believe a lot of it is about the better you understand an organization, the better you can change it, whatever the requirement is. So it goes back to my previous point about you've got to talk the same language or a common language with people so you can capture what they're saying and be sure that you understand it before going on to the next step. I also think there's a massive time saving with or it can be, you've got to choose the right tool as well. But UPN as part of a workshop is brilliant. Yeah, when we onboard people, we treat them how to do workshops. That's the power of it. If they use it at workshops or not, so how do you sit in a room full of 5-10 people and make use of their time as quick as you can? And that's really where UPN, the structure and the approach, it really speeds things up. We talk about 5 times quicker, 10 times quicker, whatever it might be. And when I talk about time with people looking to adopt or change, it's not your time. No offense, people. But
No.
your time is almost cheap. It's the 5 people you're dragging out of the business to get them on a room or on a Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be, and that all seems adds up, and people forget that. Yeah, so if you're trying to get people in the room for half a day because they're traveling, so you've got to make the most of it, that's a big commitment from the business. That's a big commitment from the individuals. And if you can speed that up and make it really engaging, then what I've seen time and time again is it goes from a rather than pushing people into workshops, you start to get a pull. Yeah, people want to sit down with you. They want to go through this process, and as a BA, that's a happy place to be. You know, if people want to be part of your workshops and want to do more because they can see how it can be applied, that's a really big win. I also think there's another benefit which is often overlooked is what happens after the BA leaves or they go on to the next shiny project. Yeah, because we are like that. You know, we do like to be. We don't like BAU. We don't like once the problem's fixed. We're not interested. We go on to the next project, or the next area. So you hand all the content over. Yeah, the content that you create is going to be owned by the process owners, whoever that might be in an organization. So handing over something that they can then understand, and they don't have to learn a new language. They don't have to learn, a big lot of instructions on how to keep up to date is a good thing. They can take it on, they can evolve it, they can understand it, and then they use it in their products, in their BAU.
So my question, Chris, sorry, can I ask a question,
Yeah,
Chris,
Oh, please
here
certainly.
as
do. That's
well?
what we're
Yeah,
here for.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, no, it completely makes a sense in here because look, I mean, for example, like, I've used, the UPN processes just now, for example, for the stakeholders to just, simplify the the comms process within this, consumer duty programs, right? I've created this, I've handed over to them, and I moved on to the another projects,
Yeah.
as a BA. But the next BA is gonna come in, for
Yeah.
example, because the comms process, let's say after 6 months, they wants to make an
Yeah.
amendments. The next
Yeah.
BA, if they don't have, the know-how on UPN process, are they gonna get rid of the UPN process or this? Nah, I don't understand this. Would they convince the stakeholders sign? Who use this? Why didn't you
Yeah.
use BPMN? There
Yeah,
is
that happens. Of course, it
that
happens definitely.
happens.
But
Yeah.
but if you go into that organization or that part of that department and they say, here's our processes and look, yeah, everyone's engaged. This is what we use for our day to day, and here's all the comments where we think it might be already be improved, and look, and here's all everything that's attached to it. You're more likely to sort of say, actually, how do we build on this? How do we change this? How do you evolve it or add the next set of processes on there? But yeah, I mean that is a risk, massive risk
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
BPMN is the standard. As in people they use Visio, they use BPMN, the way
Yeah.
variant of, and UPN is a change. And yeah, it's a journey sometimes.
I mean, that said, I mean, Chris, I mean, as you were talking there about, the act of defining the process and being in those workshops, sometimes we might have done with, if you try to go down the route of very detailed BPMN process flows, your audience, if you're not careful, can just spend most of their time, as you said, watching you moving objects around. And then, God forbid,
Yeah,
if someone says, "Oh, actually, the process is a little different halfway through," and then you've got to
yeah, big
unpicking
sigh.
it, and it's like it's not the best viewing and a lot of wasted time. So having a mechanism where you can quickly define the process, it can be adaptable, people can see it evolving, they can start to add a bit of commentary and perspective as it
Yeah,
evolves, and it's seamless, is really important. And as well as UPN, I mean, there's tools like I say tools, techniques like using control flow diagrams as an example, as a
yeah,
way to record the information, so you don't necessarily have to get bogged down in drawing the processes out in a formal way during the workshop. So it's nice to hear a technique or a tool like UPN that allows you
yeah,
to be a bit more versatile on the fly, and
yeah,
definitely, taking it further, the ability to be able to add your commentary as you go, so people can see, these are issues that we might want to fix, or these
yeah.
are, volumes, whatever information is pertinent to capture. Capturing it as you go and seeing it alongside the process is really powerful.
Yeah. And you're capturing it in a structured way. That's also a key benefit. And we've been talking about singular BA, but you're often part of a bigger team, yeah, or you're collecting information that's already been created. So if you're,
Yeah,
and again, there's no silver bullet. You still have to agree this is the standard we use, whatever approach you're using. But if you're all mapping the same same standard process, then when you pull that information out, which you can do, from UPN in a structured way, you're getting those insights a lot quicker. You're not having to try and compare different ways of process mapping or different ways of using a more complex way. And that's also a massive benefit, especially not just in time, but also just being able to see where are the issues. Being able to report out to say, we've got 10 tier 1 issues around this part of the business, all relating to this system. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe we need to go and look a bit deeper into that, or put some more detailed views into that. But,
I mean, with I think the audience hopefully now with a view that this is a useful approach for them that they can add to their BA toolkit. Maybe it's a good time, and I'll start with you first, Vipul, on this one, and then we'll go to Chris. You might kindly show us what UPN looks like. But before we get to that, Vipul, I mean, could you share some of your experience of using UPN tools, really, and what those tools might be?
Yeah, so obviously, during the time, as I mentioned, when I was with, the MX, I've come across, this processes, and this is the first time I come across the UPN processes, and been understandable how it can be used, because obviously the process flows, how it used, but UPN was slightly distinctive in terms of how you're going to use. So obviously when I've started pickup, I understood that I had the simple a simple sort of query to be answered on creating the process of the unhappy customers. And so I've created the process in terms of understood first, being honest, how I'm going to use it. And then after understood that there will be just, condense of the information is to be done 8 to 10 boxes, alongside of, because one of the things that I understood that within those boxes, within creating those UPN processes, you need to have RISI metrics, running alongside as well. So every box is somebody's responsible, somebody's, accountable. And then obviously that details needs to be obviously fitted into those boxes. So considering the process flows, which runs with the swim lanes, but it was slightly different because you're understanding that customer raising that request, then because it's a sales supports that how that the sales support request gonna get resolved from moving from one box to another. And obviously once that issues get resolved, then you confirm with the customers, and then basically that issue needs to be resolved within that um 8 to 10 boxes, as I mentioned. So you basically try and say, rather than yes and no, you just move in whether it's a resolved or not resolved, and moving into the, further boxes as we go by. So that's the first time, I've used the UPN boxes. Yeah,
Vipul, have you
UPN
used
process.
any sort of applications for this, or do you tend to use like Visio or something equivalent?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't use any application, being honest. I've used the Visios basically to
Okay.
create this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, at least it shows that for someone out there that maybe doesn't have a tool, and I know we'll come on to some examples of those in a moment, that actually the UPN, the notation itself, is something that we can use on paper or in
yeah.
Visio or PowerPoints as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And Chris, I mean, as far as tools that are available, I mean, now's a good time to talk to you about one of or some of those tools that are available. Perhaps you would be so kind to share a view of what UPN looks like, please.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously, there's the tool which is now called Spark. It's part of Netcall Liberty platform. It was Score before. I mean, yeah, I am biased. It's a great tool, but it's been built around UPN. I'll show you that and what that can look like. But Nimbus, TIBCO Nimbus, that was a really great tool in its day. Used for all sorts of organizations, multinationals, from startups to multinationals, and that's still around today. And there's another VPN tool called Elements.cloud. So when Vipul mentioned about Salesforce, they're heavily biased towards Salesforce customers. I mean, interesting aside, when we started up Score back in 2017, although our tool was focused around UPN, we never mentioned it. never talked about it because it just wasn't as known as it is today. And where it's become more popular, and you have the likes of Salesforce that recommend it, as strongly recommend it to their customers as the approach if you're analyzing your business ready before their technology. We're back on it because people are coming in, they're searching for UPN tools, which is a nice place to be. But yeah, it's quite interesting. But interesting point about Vipul there as well, because again, UPN is the standard. You can use anything. You can use post-it notes. Yeah, you can use bits of paper. Yeah, I've seen people
Exactly.
create massive UPN structure process architectures using UPN in PowerPoint. But you just trying to link it all up and do that. It's a more of a mindset and approach rather than a tool set. But I'm going to show you. Sharing is turned off for me.
Yeah, now it's for you, Chris. Okay.
There we go. Share my.
I should add at this point while you're doing that, Chris. Other tools are available, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love processes. Yeah. I'm just happy to be here talking about UPN and processes. We see my screen okay?
Got it perfectly.
Yeah,
Yep.
perfect. So I'm not going to focus on the tool. If anyone wants to know more, you can find me on
Sure.
LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to go into more detail. But what we have here is Spark. It's my demo workspace. I've got a process library full of stuff. But if I want to go and search for a procure P2P process, I can put it up quite quickly and quite easily. So this is a UPN diagram. Yeah. So, and I have a very bad habit of going over skipping the basics because this is how I look at processes. But if we were to sort of stop for a second, it's all about getting a bite-sized bit of process onto a screen, onto a page. In essence, you can map bigger, and I've seen lots and lots of very very big processes in here. But the approach, the standard is all about trying to get something on one page, and that's why we've got procure to pay on one page. Yeah, and we have our inputs. We have verb and noun activities. Yeah, that's a crucial part of this.
Yeah.
We're not doing requisitions. We're doing something to something. And again, back to the workshops, it's a really good challenge. What are we doing? That's our order process. Ordering what? Who's doing that? It gets you to think about it in a good way. And then we have the outputs, and that's often a stumbling block for people when they're coming from another standard, as to what are the outputs, because often you see the lines just connected up. But again, it's about challenging people with these simple basic building blocks, and it's you can see me wry smile on my face. It's addictive. It's really funny when you start to sit down with people, and it's not about just sort of trying to get the past tense of the previous activities. What do we get? What can we measure? What can we see? What do we lose if we skip this activity or do it badly? Yeah, and you start to get those questions, and then you can start to see we can then start to drill down into more detail. Yeah, and you can see here, the scope will stay the same. We need to identify suitable vendors. Why do we do that? So we've got a shortlist. Yeah, and we can add more detail into it. I'll show you how it builds out quickly if we've got time.
This is definitely a good example, though, Chris, of like for those people that are familiar with SciPoc.
Yeah.
You can clearly see the inputs. It's clear on some of these points at least who the suppliers of those inputs are, and the outputs, and the consumers, and the activities or process itself. So it's fairly obvious straight away. What is at the start of the process, what kicks it off, and what's happening in that somewhat sequential order.
But exactly that, and you can see here, we can get that into even more detail where we've not just got the person, but we've got the system, as well, which is often, I think most change projects these days are IT, are system driven, even, and so being able to capture that information, and then you can just add more detail into the boxes, and you can put different colors, you can add icons. Again, it's just my younger self was very strict about it. It must be UPN and nothing else, but people deviate. They add colors and the like. Hopefully keeping it to a minimum, because again, anything you're introducing that you understand, you have to assume that everyone else is going to know what that means. And so that's it. You build out a hierarchy of diagrams which you can jump around. If we look at just how it can look in a workshop environment, we haven't got time to map out a process, but if I can just hover over this box, create a drill down view, bring in my inputs, bring in my outputs, and we crack on. And it's this simple. And again, we aim this at mapping at the speed of conversation. So facilitator led. So how do we, asking the simple questions time and time again. How do we get from A to B? Yeah, and I'll tell you what, we do something to something perfect. Yeah, who does that? Well, the finance director does that. Perfect. They're accountable. They're consulted. You can add more. We can do the same with systems. We can say, have we got Salesforce in it? Only because we mentioned it. Yeah, perfect. And away we go. And then you can just crack on, map out the process in all shapes and forms, and away you go. And it's about having that conversation, understanding,
right.
challenging at each point. Why do we do this? What is the output? And it's again, it is addictive. But
That's it. I mean, just seeing the way you explain it as well. I mean, you're absolutely right. When it comes to process, you don't want the tool that you're using or the approach or technique you're using to hold up the conversation. It's
no.
to enable you to have those logical conversations and points you just called out. In terms of what is that something you're doing. What system do you do it in if that's important to you? Who's responsible for it?
Yeah.
What happens next, and then what? And it's as quick as you can get those points down, as we've just seen an example of it, the better.
No, exactly that. And we get the challenge all the time. People say our process is too complex. Or we do this 100 different ways, or it's different for each country, or you're never going to understand it. I'm sure you have the same pushback. And so a lot of when we onboard people into this way, I think it's giving them the tips and tricks to distill that down. And assume it works. Map one version at a time. Break it down, and then come back to the complexity. And it's a framework or a handrail, perhaps, is probably maybe the best description for people to get that understanding.
Yeah.
And then it comes into because it is structured, and because we are mapping the same way, we can then start to look at that. Again, I'm not going to go into the product detail, but you can start to pull out this information. So if you wanted to see, well, what systems are we using? Oh, great. Where are we using Salesforce? And so we can start to bring it out. I haven't saved it, so it won't come in, low code out, for example. And it will just pull out that information. Who's using it? Where's it used? You mentioned SIPOC. You can put out SIPOC reports. You can put out RACI templates, all this sort of stuff, because you've created a very simple, structured process, simple building blocks.
Absolutely. I mean, thanks for the demonstration there, Chris. I think it's always nice to talk about a technique, but actually to see what it looks like as well, and an example of one of those very good tools that are out there that people can use to actually define it and capture the UPN as they go is definitely beneficial. So I appreciate you taking the time to give us a little glimpse of that, really, Chris. So thank you very much. And it feels like that's a perfect segue now, what you just said, into as we draw to a close on the session as well, thinking about what is the future of UPN. And I wonder, as Chris, you've done quite a bit of speaking in terms of the demo. I'll give you a bit of a rest, and I'll ask Vipul first. But
I'm keen to hear Vipul's answer on this. So,
there you go. We'll put Vipul on the spot.
I think I just hand over to the Chris. He can just say next 15 minutes why we should just keep using UPN. Absolutely. My point of view is it is because BPMN is widely being used, and probably I think it's a lack of marketing, for the UPN process, which is probably the reason it hasn't been used. But looking in more detail with the Chris here as well, I think there is a substantial future for using UPN, definitely. So that's my initial thoughts at the minute. But how faster it will grow, it's certainly time will tell us.
That's it. And I mean, just hearing about UPN, we're not obviously not saying we shouldn't be using BPMN, absolutely not. But it's just another technique, approach that is available that we can use in the right situation. And as we recognise, there are definitely are situations. Workshops would be a good example of that, where it's appropriate to use this approach. I'm sure I know there are others, but once we've agreed that it is the right technique to use, then it's also appropriate to think about the tooling. For some of us, as we've already discussed, that can be Visio, it can be on paper, but actually there's also tools available as well. And as Chris has just demonstrated, the power of using those tools is that that for some of them, like the one we've just seen, each object that you capture is something that you can report on and extract information on fairly simply.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
Chris, I wonder what would be your view on the future of UPN?
Yeah, I can see the popularity increasing as it has done over the last few years for various reasons. Um, I think part of that is because there's a massive trend towards not just process mapping technology, but if you look at the automation tool sets and any tool set, even Salesforce, they're making it a lot easier for more people to do stuff in those tools. So I think UPN, so that being able to implement an automation or a bit of technology goes back to what I said earlier. You need to understand what you do or what you need to do in terms of a business process. So having tools and approaches where more people can use it, well and badly. I've got a bit of a philosophy. I love people just mapping processes, map bad processes. It's better than no process, but get it into people's hands. I think the popularity is going up because of that. And I think again, like you said, John, there's no kind of UPN's better than BPMN. I'm not sitting here saying that at all. It's two different approaches, two different benefits, and two different audiences. But I think there is something going to be interesting over the next months or years around one of the times you would want to use BPMN is when you're trying to automate a process. So you need that detail, you need that system flow and the level of detail that you're going to capture around that. I think there's something going to be interesting about how do we take a UPN diagram and do something similar. So if you think about look at all the information I've shown you there, and maybe the addition of some very humanistic way of talking about requirements about, well, we need to have an automation, or there's a decision matrix, or there's a alert that we need to put in, using an AI engine to take a UPN diagram and then create the basics of an automation. We're very close to that. Yeah, and I think that's going to be an interesting future. Again, it's all about that sort of citizen developer. That pushing the power for change into the organization, and I think UPN's the best approach for all that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And it's timely as well. I mean, I was looking into not necessarily UPN this morning, but BPMN in terms of using Gen AI to generate some BPMN models. At this point, I should shout out to Yuri. Go on, Yuri. Shared a video which on the topic, which I'll share in the description, which got me looking at it in a bit more detail. And that was using BPMN.io, if I recall. Makes me think if there's a UPN.io or equivalent, so I may look into that after. But I know from prior experience, prior to looking at Yuri's video anyway, some of the outputs from ChatGPT in a process sense, probably a little bit more aligned to what we've just seen in UPN than the complexity that we try to get perhaps in BPMN. I think maybe there's something in that, I think, in people to use it.
There's something else we see as well. Sorry, you just reminded me, but like you've got like AI bots and training your AI. Yeah, we've always said this like many years ago before it became a thing, but a UPN diagram is great food for AI. If you want to teach a customer service chatbot, what the flows are and how it should how it should work. Actually, a UPN diagram is really good at that. Because it's structured, it's simple. You can break it down, you can follow paths. So it's good food for AI.
And that's really really interesting point, Chris, because it's quite easy for us, particularly the way we think as BAs, to think about the tool purely from a sense of how do we capture process, how do we share it with people and stakeholders. But actually, if you can take what you've modelled and plug it into AI, and the AI to understand it as easy as possible, then you're off to a good start. And simple is normally better, I think, at the moment anyway, with AI when it comes to an input. So probably the simplistic structure that UPN gives could work better. I use the word could, but it's certainly something I might take away as a trial over the next few weeks to see how UPN and BPMN how they behave when we think about it through Gen AI lens anyway.
Indeed.
But thank you for that. Just before we go as well, just any further points, Chris, that you might want to share with this group and the audience on UPN?
No, I don't think so. I think as we sort of said, it's not about choosing one tool or one approach and thinking that's going to fit every problem you have. I think it's about choosing the right approach for the right problem. And hopefully UPN's a big part of that, but also you can use both. Yeah, it's quite common to have, UPN or that higher level engagement, we're running those workshops. And then if you get to the level where you need the detail and the power that BPM brings, great, use it, coexist. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing, in my views. So I think constantly sort of challenging yourself to make sure you're using the right approach isn't a bad thing.
Thanks, Chris. And Vipul, any last points from you?
Absolutely. Agree with Chris. You can use both together as well, 100%. Just to make it life much more simpler as well. It can start with the paper and pen, literally draw up the UPN process, and then you can go further deep down and then start creating if you want the BPN process to be created. It's perfectly, it supports each other 100% rather than sets and a competitive mode to each other.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. And I mean, the only thing I would add, I mean, for anyone out there watching this, learning about UPN for the first time, what I'd add is just give it a try, see how you get on with it.
Yeah.
Really be quite interested to hear how you get on. So perhaps let us know through the comments, or indeed, if you're interested in tooling and you like what you see on the tool that Chris gave a demonstration of, then hopefully, Chris, they can reach out to you, get a bit more information about the tool that you showed.
Please do. Please do. Always happy to talk about this. Be it you're interested in a tool or you've just got some different experience around it. I'm more than happy to talk.
Brilliant. All right. Well, on that sense, I'm sure this won't be the last time the three of us talk about UPN or process for that matter. So I look forward to when we next chat. But in the meantime, thank you both for sharing your insights. And for anyone, as I said, share your comments and let us know how you found the session. But thanks, Vipul. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, John.